Hello RPG fans, welcome to the world of unlimited imagination. If you're like me, you love to think about what kind of character you'd play next in your favorite role-playing game. So today, we're going to talk through a wizard build for Dungeons & Dragons 2024 rules. We're going to follow a normal agenda here. We're going to build the character with enough detail that you'll be able to see it. We're going to go into D&D Beyond and show what buttons to click and explain why pretty quickly, but with enough detail for new players. Hopefully this build's going to have some interesting things in it that could also be inspiration for experienced players, some roleplay ideas, and this is meant to be a character that's effective all the way from level 1 to 20. If you want to pick any level for this character to play a campaign or module, the character will be effective. We're going to have some added discussions. There's going to be two key points for this build. One is we're going to use the School of Conjuration. There's a lot of debate about the minor conjuration feature for this class, and I'm going to offer my personal definitive engineering solution for how to handle this with what I think is within the spirit of the game, while also allowing the player a lot of creative freedom to solve problems. So we'll balance that out, and I'll tell you how I would do it. We'll also have a long discussion about poison, the poison mechanic in the game. I'll offer my insights based on engineering and statistics, how I understand these mechanics to work to help players optimize their use of it, and also to help GMs keep it under control and understand the implications of some of the interactions. So with that, we're going to present Dweller Zarna, a wizard that's meant to work in heavy obscurement like darkness or smoke or fog cloud. Please remember, as we go through this, hit that like button. It does help me. It helps the channel. It helps more people see this content. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this in the future, and I would love to see your comments. I don't have a perfect understanding of the rules. There's always interpretations, and different people do things differently. So if you have some comments, I would love to hear that. Learn more about the game and have the discussion. Please leave those down below so we can talk. So the concept for this character, darkness is a fun spell. If it goes like you want it to, it gives you concealment, so you get advantage on your attacks. Enemies trying to attack you will have disadvantage on their attacks against you. And the darkness prevents enemies from seeing you unless they have a special method to do so. So spells that target you by saying target creature you can see won't work when you're in the darkness. Heavy Obscurement works the same way for smoke or fog cloud in that it prevents targeting and makes it difficult for enemies. So if we have a way to deal with it, that's going to give us a huge advantage in combat. Wizards famously struggle with multi-classing, so with a lot of these other characters, we're able to take a couple levels of Warlock, grab Devil Sight. That solves the problem of seeing in darkness. With a Wizard build, we really can't afford to do that. Just taking a couple levels in Warlock is a big detour. We lose spell levels, not only spell level progression with the Wizard, but also we'll be casting spells of a lower level for any given party level. And for people who've played Wizards before, you know, you really don't want to give that up. So we're going to have to build a blind fighting wizard. And I also want to solve the problem of feeling useless for the first 6 levels of gameplay. Now, this is my personal experience with playing a wizard. Other people may have a different experience, but as a low-level wizard, even when your spells start to come online, you get really good spells at 3rd level. So at character level 5, 3rd level spells come in. And even though that makes your character feel stronger, you have so few of those spell slots. And you've given up so much to even have the wizard spell casting, right? These characters have low armor class, low hit points, bad saves. If the party gets ambushed and there's a melee character on top of a wizard, sometimes all you can do is just take your whole turn trying to get out of there before you get killed in one hit. Even at higher levels, wizards are subject to this. They're made out of glass, and if they get into melee, they may have to spend their turn getting away instead of doing something else. I'm an engineer. I like graphs. So to me, a normal character is represented by the red line here. In the first 5 levels, you really feel like your power's coming online pretty strongly. A lot of characters have this big spike at level 5 where they get extra attack. They get a second attack per turn. For the next few levels, maybe it feels like the monsters then start getting ahead of the party again. And then from there on, a lot more features kick in, and your character feels fully effective after a few levels. By level 12 or so, most characters feel fully effective. For a wizard, it always feels like we're behind that. If the combats go longer than a few rounds, you drop a few spells, and then in the 3rd round of combat, you have to think to yourself, if we have 3 or 4 combats today, can I afford to cast another spell? or am I down to casting cantrips and doing 6 damage with a firebolt, you know? So to me, my personal experience, low-level wizards feel incredibly unrewarding. So with this build, what we're going to try to do, we're going to use a fighter level. We're going to try to give this character a kick in the pants at low levels. Still in that like level 3 to 5 range, you're going to feel like you're getting behind other characters. But that's going to catch up pretty quickly, and we're going to end up with a wizard that feels pretty good to play at all levels, and I think better than most wizards. We're going to do that by taking dwarf as a race. It helps with what we want to do. Tremor sense is nice, things like that. But I really like the durability for a wizard. At low levels, poisons are pretty prevalent and can be a real problem. You take an extra 2d4 poison damage, that could be the difference between living and dying. Dwarves have a bunch of poison resist abilities, so that's nice. And they've also got an extra hit point per level. When you're getting so few hit points with your wizard levels, that hit point makes a difference. Fighters are going to give you a good starting hit point die, proficiency in con saves that's going to help us keep concentration on our spells. We're going to get access to all the armor in the game. We're going to be a medium armor wearer because we really won't have the opportunity to wear heavy armor or the strength to do it with this character. We get weapons that we can use. We get weapon masteries, second wind for self-healing. And again, if we take a little damage in combat, we could use our bonus action to heal up. That's a big deal. The one level of fighter isn't going to delay our spell casting progression too much, so I'm willing to give that up to smooth out the character curve. So let's take a look at how we do that. When I build these characters, I give them all roll targets. So the rolls for this character are going to be evaluated in 6 different elements, 3 for combat, 2 for exploration, and 1 for social. In terms of damage, it's really hard to say how much damage a wizard does, because if the right thing to do is cast a web spell and control the combat and keep some of the enemies from getting to you, that's more valuable than just doing damage. So a lot of wizard turns aren't really about damage, they're about something else. But when you do damage, of course, if you can fireball 10 targets at once, the damage is absolutely insane. So in the end, the damage is somewhere in between. Let's say 7. And we're going to have some tips and tricks that I think are going to make this character more damaging than the average wizard, so let's put it above average. In terms of support, we will have some ways that we're going to support our allies. We'll give that a 6. In terms of control, we're going to balance this character between damage spells, control spells, and support spells. So we're not looking for the absolute most control that we can get. We're going to look for good generic control spells that we can use in combats where it's relevant. We'll give that a 7. In exploration, I'll give it a 3. This is not meant to be the explorer character, but in problem solving, we're going to have good investigation, intelligence-based skills. I'll give that an 8. For influence, social settings, we'll give that a 0. This character isn't meant to do a lot in social settings, and we're not going to pretend that that's any different than it is. So let's meet Zarna. In my imagination, Zarna is a half-breed. There's not really rules in the 2024 edition that address kind of how we want to do half races. It was brought up in the playtesting materials, but then as far as I could see, it was just dropped. But I like what they said. You can choose to be a half race if you want to be, but it doesn't change anything about how the race plays, how the species plays out. So in this case, we're going to pick a dwarf, but we're going to look somewhere between dwarf and human. We're going to be kind of a half-breed. We're going to be a little too tall for a dwarf. We're going to have no beard. So some female dwarfs have beards, so we're not going to have that. So we're obviously going to be a half-breed. I feel like this character is a bit of an outcast, and I kind of want to play into that outcast theme. Her experiments with toxins and poisons already cost her an eye and potentially some of her sanity. She was recruited by Clan Abdituran to make poisons for the black market. She's relatively young for a dwarf, but she's seen much of the world. She's got journals. She writes everything down. She's trained in the use of arms and armor, so she'll start out as a fighter, like everyone else. But she's always been more drawn to the magical stuff than the brawling. So we're establishing a character here that starts out as a fighter, but wants to be something else. So the Conjuration subclass, I've seen it presented in other content creators who do a rating of all the wizard subclasses, and it ends somewhere like a B or a C tier alternative for wizard. There's other classes that are rated much more highly. I've also seen videos that claim that this is the most powerful subclass in the game. It's broken. You shouldn't even let your player play this. So what's the difference? What's the difference between people who think it's a C tier or a B tier subclass and those who feel like it's completely overpowered? To me, it all comes down to the minor conjuration feature that you get at level 3. So we're going to spend a bunch of time when we hit wizard level 3 and get our subclass. We're going to talk all about minor conjuration, how that works, how I think it should work. I'll give you my advice, not rules as written, but how I interpret it so that it makes sense in a game and we can use it for fun without breaking it. If you don't want to have those discussions, you can play any subclass you want with this character. It's the subclass itself is not making or breaking the build. So if you've heard that Graviturgy or Divination are broken, pick those. It's fine. The subclass is not the key to success here. All right. Species, background, and class. We're going to take that dwarf for added durability. We're going to take the fighter class to get all those things that we want. We're going to take the blind fighting style so that we can always see everything within 10 feet, no matter what the darkness or obscurement might be. Wizards are pretty weak at the first few levels, so we're going to smooth that out. And then for background, we're going to take Scribe. Scribe is kind of the bridge. When you're a fighter, you're not offered wizard-type skills to choose from. So we're going to try to pick the best we can. Then the Scribe is going to give us the skilled feat, and then we can start picking some stuff that's going to make us feel like a wizard so that when we start taking that class, we're not left behind. Or if you just took a fighter level and you didn't pay attention, you would actually end up in a situation where you wouldn't have the skills to scribe scrolls potentially. So we want to make sure that that's not a problem. Taking Scribe is going to fix all that stuff, be a nice bridge. For ability scores, we're actually going to take 14 Dex and 14 Con. We can get those and still max out our intelligence for the character. And also, we're going to have some wisdom. We don't really have room for charisma in this character for the warlock levels, so we won't have to do that with the way we're going to do the build. For equipment, we're going to take the gold from a fighter. We're going to take the starting equipment from Scribe. We're going to look for fighter-type stuff. Chain, shirt, shield, rapier, shortbow, arrows. But then we're also going to talk to the GM about getting mundane stuff. Chalk, glue, grease, cloth, soap, a bird cage. Little knick-knack type stuff. This character is going to be a problem solver. This character is built for people who like to use inventive things within the game to solve problems and have fun. So start that right from level 1. I'll give you an example with grease and cloth. You're trying to break into some place. If you shatter a window, it's going to make a noise and alert the guards. Put grease on the window. Put cloth over the grease. When you break the window, all the shards of glass are still stuck to the cloth with the grease. You can break in without making a sound. Imagine what you can do with soap. If you get in a maze, you can use chalk to mark your way through the maze and help solve that problem. There's all kinds of little knick-knack things you could have. Make sure it's okay with your GM, and then maybe buy what you can out of the shop, create some custom items, but be honest with what you're doing up front, and give yourself some fun problem-solving tools. With this character, I would also ask the GM if I could have an Ursat's Eye for free at level 1. It's a common magic item. This magical eye replaces a real one that was lost or removed. While the Ursat's Eye is embedded in your eye socket, you can see through it. I don't know of a way to abuse this. It's not a powerful item, but for roleplay purposes, if we want to say our character already at this point at level 1, something happened, our character lost an eye, why can't we have an Ursat's Eye? There's absolutely no effect other than we have a gem instead of an eye. Maybe if we're in a fight and somebody tries to poke us in the eye, it helps, but I can't think of a way that this could be abused, so it's just strictly for role-playing. Could be fun. I like those kind of things. At second level, we're going to roll into Wizard. So with that in mind, let's take a look at D&D Beyond Character Builder. And let's walk through here, picking the selections and how you would build this character if you were new to the game and playing this. For core fighter traits, we get to pick 2 skills. We'll take acrobatics. It's good to have either athletics or acrobatics on a character. There's a lot of things in the game, crossing a bridge, or landing from a short fall or stuff like that, where a GM might ask for an athletics or acrobatics check. So I like to have one or the other on most characters. We'll pick acrobatics here since we'll have better dexterity than strength. We'll also take history. That's an intelligence-based skill that works well with wizards, so we'll grab that. For fighting style, we're going to grab this blind sighting. That gives us blind fighting. It gives us blind sight within 10 feet. It's not always going to allow us to target a monster. They might be more than 10 feet away, but it's always going to allow us to see our group. If we're working in darkness, the paladin has an aura of protection. We're going to try to stay close to that aura and close to our group. So blind sight within 10 feet, we should always be able to see all of our party members. So that's kind of the critical reason why I want this. If you'd rather do something else, you can take a different fighting style. Second wind is going to be really fantastic for a character like this. If we do take some hits in combat, we don't mind. We can recover 1d10 plus our fighter level, which for the entirety of this character is always going to be 1d10 plus 1. So on average, you're going to recover 5 or 6 hit points. I guess 5.5 plus 1, so 6 or 7 hit points. So as a character, as a wizard, you know, you would start out with like 8 hit points, and if you took 6 hit points, you'd be feeling like you're almost dead. With this character, we're going to start out with 13 hit points, and if we take 6, we'll just second wind and heal ourselves back up, and we won't even have to bother the cleric or worry about it at all. It's just a bonus action. So you can see how this character is going to completely change the feel of playing a wizard with just this one level of fighter. It starts already here at level 1. For weapon masteries, I like Vex. At low levels, being able to give yourself advantage against tougher monsters is a big deal. A lot of creatures are going to die in 1 or 2 hits. Vex only allows you to get advantage against a creature that you hit when you're trying to hit it again. So in a lot of situations, Vex won't even be that effective. But if you're fighting a single high armor class boss mob at low levels, being able to continually chain advantage every time you hit is a pretty big deal. So I'll take a rapier for Vex. I will take a short bow for Vex. And I'll take a quarterstaff for Topple. We won't really be able to use that until level 2. For background, here we're going to take that scribe. That's going to give us all the stuff that we want. Dexterity and intelligence, we can increase. We're getting the skilled feat. The skilled proficiencies here are great. Investigation and perception are both good for a character like this. And for skilled feat, we're going to pick Arcana so we can do wizard things. Also enables crafting once we have Arcana, so we'll take that. We'll take Nature. This is going to be a character that's involved with poison, poison making, all those kinds of things. And to harvest poison, you'll make a Nature check, so we got to have that as a skill. It is an intelligence-based skill, so it's good. We'll take Jeweler's Tools so that with our crafting, we can make jewelry-based items. With the ability scores, we'll take a +1 to Dexterity, a +2 to Intelligence. To give this character a little bit of personality here in the character builder, we'll give her dark black curly hair, we'll make her taller than a normal dwarf, and we'll give her some personality traits here. She's curious, she likes to study books and people. She's probably staring at you right now, and she's probably not going to stop anytime soon. She doesn't understand the social awkwardness of it, and if she's curious, she's just going to stare at you. In a way, she's above it all. She really doesn't care what people think. Rules and social interactions, that's for people who care about such things, and she really doesn't. Her alignment is pretty chaotic. She's kind of all over the place and doesn't really care what people think. She's a toxin enthusiast, and this could make interesting role play. Let's say you're walking through the woods and you get exposed to a plant toxin. Most of the group is moaning and groaning, making all kinds of saves against poison. Maybe Zarna's rolling around in it. Maybe she's like, wow, this is so cool. Maybe I can make this myself. Of course, dwarves have resistance to poison, and they get to advantage on those saves. But maybe she likes that kind of thing. Maybe she likes exposing herself to poison. Could provide some role-playing moments. The last one is self-entertained. We've all probably met people like this who tell jokes, and then they laugh at their own jokes really loudly. And then even if the joke isn't funny, they simply pretend that you didn't get it, and they're not going to explain it. And they say something like, oh, well, you'll get it later. You'll laugh later. So, make the occasional dad joke and laugh at yourself. For flaws, I'll give her overconfident. She's too smart to fail. So we can use that in the game somehow. Maybe she wants wyvern poison, wyvern, however it's pronounced. I'll pronounce it wyvern. If it's pronounced wyvern in your neck of the woods, then I apologize. But let's say she wants to make some of that poison. She might convince the group to try to go take on a wyvern at level 3. And that may or may not be a good decision, but she's going to be completely confident that no matter what, it'll work out fine. She'll figure it out. She'll make a plan, and the party will be okay. And it may or may not be okay. So, and the party may or may not agree to it. But things like that could be fun if you play them in the right way. Here we're going to pick that dwarf, and it's good. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, overall the dwarf is probably 6 or 7 out of 10. I think it's one of the better. The species are all good. In the past, there have been species that were clearly better than others. I think the species are all a valid option now. You could pick human, elf, dwarf, gnome, Goliath. All of these races are, I think, balanced in a way that they're all viable. So I would say a dwarf, 6 or 7 out of 10. There's some really good features, and I like the features for a wizard. Medium height, we made the character taller than a dwarf, but it doesn't really matter. We're still medium. Dark vision out to 120 feet. We have resistance to poison damage, so we take half damage from poisons always. And we also have advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the poison condition specifically. So that's good. We have Dwarven Toughness that gives us an extra hit point for every level. Again, for wizards with their low hit dice, that's really nice to have. Stone Cunning gives us Tremor Sense if we're standing on stone. That goes for 60 feet. It doesn't allow you to, quote, see your target with Tremor Sense, but you know exactly where it's at. So let's say there's a fog cloud up and you can't see any of the targets, and you cast a spell and you say, okay, GM, I want to put the spell right here and affect these 4 enemies. And the GM might say, well, you can't see the enemies. As long as the spell doesn't say that you have to see them to target them, Tremor Sense lets you know exactly where they're at, so there's no reason you can't position your spell exactly where it would be most effective. So that's how we're going to use Tremor Sense when it makes sense to use it that way. We're going to take Common Sign Language. Everybody in the Abdituran group is going to take Sign Language. And the idea is this. If you cast Darkness, things can't see in. That's an advantage for your party. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're hidden. Sounds still come out of the darkness as normal, but if the whole group needs sign language, then there's no need to talk. You don't have to do telepathic stuff. You don't have to speak. You can all speak within the darkness using sign language and stay totally silent. So it's a little trick we're going to use to try to take advantage of. Here we're going to take 13 in dexterity. That goes to 14 with the +1. 15 in intelligence goes up to 17 with a +2. We'll take constitution straight to 14. And here I put wisdom at 12. And then I start thinking to myself, well, I will probably take resilient wisdom with this character at some point. We'll talk about that much later in the build, but I end up deciding to take wisdom all the way to 13. If we can round that out later, that's good. And we don't really need the strength anyway. If we're going to be a medium armor user, we're not really going to be carrying around a lot of weapons. So with this character, it's fine. We don't really need the strength. So we'll pop that 13 over into wisdom. Here we'll take the items that we talked about. We'll grab that chain shirt, a rapier, a short bow, a shield, and a quarterstaff. Quarterstaff at this point is just a walking stick for us, but okay. It's a cheap item that we can grab if we want it. I take some soap and some chalk. Those are both available in the character builder here. But when I try to find grease, there's really nothing for it. So that would have to be a custom item that you would make. So here's Zarna at level 1, looking pretty good. 13 hit points, 17 armor class with just a normal chain shirt and a shield. A wizard with good dexterity and mage armor could be at 16. If you had 16 dexterity and mage armor, you could be at 16. So we're already at 17 without having to use any spell slots to cast spells. So pretty good. And that'll last for the entire character's career. We'll always have good armor class because we can wear any armor we want, and use a shield for a lot of this character's career. All right. The 2 hits on this character are okay. We do have dexterity at 14, So at level 1, just as a fighter, you will be able to make decent hit rolls. Not as good as if you had, of course, a 16 like your main stat, but it's only one level. Level 1 goes quickly. And we'll be into level 2 as a wizard. And once we hit level 2, we're going to get spellcasting. That's what we're here for, of course. We want to be a spellcaster. Let's go. Wizards get Ritual Adept. Rituals allow you to cast a spell without using a spell slot, no matter what kind of caster you are. But with a wizard, you can cast the spell without having it prepared. So with a wizard, if you cast a ritual, as long as it's in your spell book, you don't have to have it prepared. And as long as you take the time to cast it as a ritual, it doesn't use a spell slot. Folks, these are free spells. For a wizard, the spells are for free without having them prepared right from level 1. It's so good. And it's one of the reasons why wizards are generally accepted as the strongest of the spell casting classes. Not because they get the strongest spell casting, but just because they have access to all of the spells in a meaningful way. You also get Arcane Recovery already at level 1. You can, once per day, after a short rest, you can recover a number of spell slots equal to half your wizard level rounded up. So at level 1, you can recover 1 level of spell slots. At level 5, for example, you could recover 3 levels worth of spell slots. Even when you get to higher level of wizard, most of the time you're recovering first and second level spell slots. Even when you can recover like 5 or 6 levels, a lot of times you're going to do like 3 level 1 spells and 2 level 2 spells. Simply because you get shield at level 1, and that burns your level 1 spell slots pretty quickly. And spells like web at level 2 are very easily usable and functional for the whole game. So a lot of times it's the lower level spell slots you want to refresh. But this is a fantastic feature. It lets you have more spell casting every day. But it's once per day that you can use that feature. It's fine. It's really all we need, right? True Strike. True Strike is one of the reasons to build the way we're doing it. Guided by a flash of magical insight, make an attack with a weapon. The attack uses your spell casting ability for the attack and damage roll, instead of strength or dexterity. If the attack deals damage, it can be radiant. I think we would choose that. I would think for most combats, unless somehow a character is specifically immune to radiant, we would just True Strike, declare the damage as radiant, use our intelligence as the attack roll and damage modifier, and now we are a fully functional fighter. We're shooting our short bow with intelligence. We're swinging our rapier with intelligence. Whatever we're doing, quarterstaff now comes online too. It's no longer a strength weapon. It's an intelligence-based weapon. So it's the True Strike is how we're going to be able to have consistent damage for the first 5 levels. When you get to level 5, it gives you an upgrade in damage. Levels 11 and 17, like most cantrips, you get bumps to the damage. Our second trademark cantrip is going to be Poison Spray. Poison is generally considered a poor damage type because a lot of creatures are resistant or immune to poison. We're going to overcome that with the Poisoner feat at level 4, but we're definitely going to take Poison Spray at early levels. When we hit character level 5, we get that feat, we get Poisoner. We're going to be using Poison Spray, and we're never going to look back. Okay, this cantrip does a D12 of damage. Most cantrips do a D8, maybe a D10. Toll the Dead does a D12 against a target that's already injured. This is one of the few cantrips that I know of, maybe the only cantrip that I can think of, that has D12 as its base damage. It trades that off against a very short range. It's only got a 30-foot range. But this group is operating out of darkness. Enemies are generally going to have to come to us, or we're going to start the combat close to enemies with an ambush. So the 30-foot range should not be an issue for when we want to cast Poison Spray. And if things are further away, we always just True Strike them with our short bow and have more range. All right, so with that in mind, we'll take the Poison Spray cantrip. We probably won't be using it that much at lower levels. We probably will be using that True Strike more. But at character level 5, we'll go over to the Poison Spray and never look back. With first level spells, folks, at every given spell level for wizards, there is so much good stuff. Man, when you look at the spell list, there are so many of these spells that if you're in the situation where you need the spell and you have it, it's so good. So what we're going to look at spells in kind of two different ways. One is, what are the spells that are good enough that we would want to have them prepared most of the time? And then what are the spells that we want in our spell book so that situationally we can pull them out? At level 5, wizards get the ability to swap out a spell at a short rest, so we can frequently just trade out to what we need. So we'll have sort of base spells that we always want to have prepared, and then we'll have flex slots and we can put in whatever makes most sense. A lot of people like sleep. Let's take a look at sleep. Each creature of your choice in a 5-foot radius sphere makes a save or potentially falls asleep, at which point they become incapacitated. They could be woken up. They wake up immediately if they take damage. A 5-foot sphere doesn't have to be snap to grid. So you can get multiple creatures, but at most reasonable levels, it's going to be hard to get more than 2 people into that little 5-foot radius bubble. That is a pretty small area of effect. And to be honest with you, with this character, if I could drop a fog cloud and have blind sight, completely control the battlefield, give advantage to myself, give disadvantage to my enemies, I can't think of a reason why I would ever use sleep when I could use fog cloud instead. I understand that sleep, takes an enemy out of the fight, but the fog cloud could potentially take 8 enemies and give them all disadvantage on their attacks. To me, it feels like fog cloud is so much better than sleep, I'm not even going to look at it for this particular character. Doesn't mean sleep's not a good spell, I just don't like it for this character. Once you've picked all the spells that you want, if you're actually building this character in the D&D Beyond character builder, understand that there's 2 separate phases to it. In the first phase, you have to go to your spells known and pick a bunch of spells. And then you have to go separately to this item called the Spellbook. And then here you see all of the spells that you've learned. And now you have to pick which spells you have prepared. And it will help you understand that you only get to pick 4 first level prepared spells. And we're going to pick Featherfall, Fog Cloud, Ice Knife, Shield. We'll talk about these spells, but Featherfall to me is one of those things that you take at level 1 as a wizard, and it never comes off your spell list for the entire duration of play. When you need Featherfall, it's a reaction, and you don't take falling damage. You never know when you're going to need it, and when you do need it, you're such a hero for the party. A pit trap opens up, everybody's falling. It's like a 60-foot fall. Featherfall, no problem, no damage. We're all fine. We don't land prone. It's such a big deal. If one of your party members, just one, a rogue, steps on a trap, he didn't see it, pit opens up, he's going to fall. Featherfall. You're fine, man. It's when you need it and you have it, you're a hero. So for me, I'm not ever willing to take it off the list. You can, if you play your wizard however you like it, but I think it's worth it. Fog Cloud, we're going to take that for the reasons of having an obscurement spell. We're going to be able to function in the obscurement with blind sight, the enemies won't. Ice Knife is an area of effect spell, not very good. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And then of course we'll take Shield, because Shield is one of the best spells, level 1 spells you can get. When you need it and you have it, it's just like a lot like Featherfall. When you need it and you have it, and you just say, okay, all those attacks miss, it's pretty good. Feels pretty good. Level 2, look at these hit points. We're up at 20 hit points. Now, if we'd built a wizard with just like, let's say, an elf wizard with 14 constitution, you'd have 8 hit points at your starting level, and you would have gotten another 6 hit points now. So you'd be at 14 hit points. We're at 20 hit points with this character. So we've got 50% more hit points than a normal wizard, already at level 2, with our first wizard level under our belt. This character is going to feel a lot more durable than just a straight wizard. Feels pretty good. Armor class is still 17. We haven't upgraded any of our equipment. And here you can see our hit rolls. So poison spray is a +5 to hit. Ice knife would be a +5 to hit. If you use the short bow or the rapier with true strike, those would also be a +5 to hit. That's a normal hit for any character with a 17 in their main stat at level 2. So we're good to go. We're fighting like pretty much everybody else in the game is fighting at level 2. But I dare say that we have a little more flexibility than the average fighter or the average wizard. The combination of those two things at level 2 is pretty strong. If you true strike with just a regular wizard, you don't have proficiency with martial weapons, so you won't get as good of weapons, and you won't have the weapon masteries for those weapons. So the fighter level and the wizard level combine to give you the weapons, the weapon masteries, and the ability to use them with an intelligence-based character. So at level 2, I think we're doing great. All right. So we already talked about this. We'll move on. Shield spell as a reaction, +5 to your armor class till the start of your next turn. It's a very powerful build. It's a very powerful spell for some builds. It's okay for this build, but when people build characters that are intended to use shield, they don't really think about the fact that at low levels, there are so few spell slots available. You go into combat. If you use shield twice in one combat, you are out of level 1 spells. You can get 1 spell level back at your short rest. Use 1 shield again. 3 shields for the entire day. It feels so bad. So if you're using that at low levels, just be aware you only get a few of them. Now, it can provide some pretty heroic moments, right? The GM floods the party with a whole bunch of wolves. A normal wizard would be scared to death to be surrounded by wolves. You're not. You already got 17 AC. You put it up to 22 with a shield, and that's pretty hard for low-level enemies to hit. And you can be a hero for a couple rounds, and it's worth it. And then later on, like I said, we'll often be using our level 1 spell slots for shield anyway, and then recharging a bunch of those once we can recover multiple spell levels with our wizard feature. We're a Conjuration wizard, that's the target, so Ice Knife is a Conjuration spell, so it fits with our theme. It doesn't require a target. It's strange, right? You create a shard of ice and fling it at one creature. It does not say that you have to see it. So, nice. It works with Tremor Sense, for example. The GM says you can't see that target. Tremor Sense doesn't allow you to see. Ice Knife doesn't say you need to see. It just says fling a shard at one creature within range, period. Make a ranged spell attack. On a hit, the target takes D10 piercing damage. On a miss, hit or miss, the shard then explodes, and every creature, including the original target, within 5 feet, must succeed on a dexterity save or take 2d6 cold damage. I'll remind you all, 2d6 is how much a greatsword does. So 2d6 damage, 7 average damage is no joke. And if you can catch 2 or 3 creatures with an Ice Knife, it's pretty rewarding. I would give this spell overall a 3 out of 10. It's a pretty bad spell, except for at level 1, where it's one of the few area of effect options you have. You also have Flaming Hands, for example. You could take that instead. That's fine. That has better damage, and it's a little cone. But it is close range. At least Ice Knife gives you 60 foot of range that you can use. Fog Cloud at low levels, it gives you these obscurement tricks. A 20-foot radius sphere is big. It's heavily obscured. Heavily obscured means you can't see things within that area. Enemies can't see you within the area. But you can use your blind sight and you're fine. You can use Tremor Sense and know where things are at. So again, this whole group, the Abdituran group, is a bunch of characters that are built to work in the Fog Cloud. If you're in a different party and you're playing this as a standalone wizard, you will have to be sure that your party's okay with the Fog Cloud when you cast it. Even if the party doesn't want to work in a Fog Cloud for a normal combat, it's a great way to escape. Once you obscure the area, you can walk away Unless the enemy has a way to see you, they can't make attacks of opportunity against you. So if you're in melee with a character that really scares you, normally you would have to take an action to disengage so that you could walk away without taking an attack of opportunity. If you cast a fog cloud as your action, you can just walk away and not take the attack of opportunity unless that creature, that enemy, has blind sight or some way specifically to see through Heavy Obscurement. So this is definitely worth a level 1 spell slot, and we're going to leave it in our list for a long time. And it's an alternative to darkness. Sometimes darkness spell is going to work and it's going to be the greatest thing. Sometimes creatures are going to be able to see through the darkness. They won't really be able to deal with fog, so you can use fog or smoke. For ritual spells, detect magic, find familiar, comprehend language, identify, alarm. Don't prepare them, have them in your book, cast them as a ritual. It's a free spell slot. It doesn't use a spell slot, and you don't need to have it memorized. Our familiar. I recommend a bat. Bat solves all of our seeing issues. Telepathic connection. While your familiar is within 100 feet, communicate with it telepathically. As a bonus action, you can see through the familiar's eyes, hear what it hears, gaining the benefits of any senses that it has. Pay close attention to that last little bit of the sentence. You gain the benefits of any special senses that it has. A bat has blind sight 60 feet. As a bonus action, you have blind sight 60 feet. Perch the bat on your shoulder, fly it up 40 feet in the air, however you want to handle your bat, fine by me, but put it in a position where it can see. As a bonus action, you get blind sight 60 feet. There shouldn't be any situations now where you can't see what you need to. Bonus action, blind sight, target a spell, even if you need to see, it's fine. Okay? So for the cost of a find familiar ritual spell that doesn't even take a prepared spell slot, we have a solution. Now, later in the build, we're definitely going to want to get our bonus action back. So we're going to craft a Gem of Seeing with our crafting. Gem of Seeing allows us to have True Sight. True Sight will work in darkness. It will not work in fog. It's not blind sight. In some cases, True Sight's better. In some cases, it's worse. But by having True Sight, we'll be able to use that to see through darkness when that's the party's tactic, and we won't have to use our bonus action. Owls are still good. There's later there'll be a reason why we might want to summon a scorpion or another familiar. But for now, we'll make a bat. My daughter made the bat small, green, cute, friendly, and named it Fliegenfresser. Okay, have fun with your familiar. Familiars are just a really super fun and characterful thing that you can do with any spellcaster that gets Find Familiar. Make your familiar part of your character's personality. So that brings our spell list for the first level spells: Ice Knife, Shield, Fog Cloud, Featherfall. At level 2 Wizard, you get one more prepared spell. I would take Witch Bolt. It's okay for boss fights. It would give you a spell that can do damage over multiple turns without having to revert to cantrips. It's okay, but our cantrips are fine. True Strike is good enough in a lot of cases, especially if we can generate advantage. True Strike with advantage is pretty reliable. So at level 2, we're Fighter 1, Wizard 1. Out of combat, we've got Investigation, Knowledge checks. Others can help us with that stuff, but we're going to be the best character in this particular group at that. In roleplay, in social settings, right from the start, this character should be very curious, should be a keen observer. With the minor conjuration feature later on, we're going to have a lot of opportunities to duplicate items. You never know what it is that you might see that might be important later. If somebody wants to disguise themselves as someone, being able to conjure up an item that looks exactly like some trademark thing that they have or use could be beneficial. So pay attention in social settings, observe things. It's something for you to do when you're a 8 charisma character. In combat, True Strike, we're typically going to default to the short bow and just strike from range. If we need to put on the shield for armor class and go into melee, it's absolutely no problem. We'll act like a fighter, go into melee, and start doing that, right? Short bow and a rapier, you can do vex chaining against hard enemies. So Vex says if you hit something, your next attack until the end of your next turn has advantage. At low levels, enemies die so fast that you'll hit them once, and if that doesn't kill them, probably one of your other party members kills it. The likelihood that you're going to get another attack the next turn against an enemy that's still alive is limited. But if it happens against a harder creature, a boss mob, something with higher armor class, once you hit it, you get advantage on your next attack. It kind of lets you chain your hits that way. So it can be pretty good. This character doesn't really need, slow or topple or other push effects, things like that. So if you want to do that kind of stuff, you can. It's no problem. Take a push weapon and go into close combat and use your True Strike to push things around. It's up to you. The character is a fighter plus at level 2. But I would play this character not as a wizard in armor. At low levels, I would play this character as a fighter that has some spells. And I would use the spells pretty much as reactions. It would either be Fog Cloud or I'd be waiting for use of Shield or Featherfall. So I'd be a fighter. I would use the cantrip. I'd True Strike pretty much every turn. But then occasionally cast a reaction spell when it makes sense. That preserves your spell slots. And if you're completely out of spell slots for the day, you don't feel useless because that's not how you're playing your character anyway. We'll be able to do crafting at low level. We'll have Arcana, calligraphy, jewel crafting. That allows Zarna to work on scribing spells in her spellbook, making scrolls if she wants to, and making gem-based magic items like the Ursat's Eye, Gem of Seeing, Ioun Stones. We'll work on a Gem of Seeing. If we get that done at a relatively low level, we're going to help other characters build what they want. This character isn't gear greedy, so we're going to help other people get what they want. The gear that we do want that Gem of Seeing, and if we could get an Arcane Grimoire, some people view this item as overpowered because it gives you +1 to your spell attacks. In that regard, it's just like having a magic weapon. If you cast a poison spray cantrip and you get a +1 to it, it's basically like having a +1 weapon. The problem is the +1 to spell DC is also in there, and spell DCs are tailored to kind of work in a certain way throughout the game, and once your character starts increasing the spell DCs, it sort of throws off the game statistics. If your GM is reluctant to allow these items because, they've heard that it's overpowered, ask them if you can have it and just use the spell attack. I just want the bonus from spell attack so I can have a magic weapon style spell attack. And just skip the spell DC. Now, if the GM will allow the item exactly as written, that's, of course, what we really want. But if they have a problem with it, really, for this character, the spell attack is the better part of it that we would want to keep. So again, let's go back and let's take a look at this character and think about how she plays. She's too tall. She lacks a beard. She's got traits that mark her as a half-blood. I think she plays as a complicated blend. She's part friend, helpful person. She knows a lot of things, but she's also like this mysterious sociopath. One eye is an Ursat's Eye. It's made out of a gem. The other eye, she has this complicated clockwork monocle that she has over her eye. So you can't tell where she's looking. She's got a bat that's nesting in her hair, and she's pretty annoying about being right all the time. I would say that her clothes are like she's working with acids and poison all the time, so her clothes are probably dotted with little holes. And she probably has no qualms about testing poisons on herself or other people. Maybe she has a list of test subjects, and if other people in the party mess with her, she just puts them on her list of test subjects, and then a couple days later puts some truth serum into the soup, and let's see what happens with that person's character that night around the campfire when they have to answer everything truthfully. So insert a little chaos into this character. I think maybe a combination of Hermione Granger with that kind of, really helpful but really kind of smart alecky know-it-all sort of thing, and combine that with Isabel Maru, who's Dr. Poison from DC Comics, right? Sort of this crazy poison-soaked sociopath. So I think this character in my mind is a little bit of those two things combined together. So let's go look at the builder. Let's go look at taking our third level here. And then we'll talk about minor conjuration, and I will give my input on how I think that should be handled. At level 2 of Wizard, we would get expertise in one of our skills. I think investigation is the clear winner here. You could also argue that, I don't think nature is a feature that you could take, but you could also argue for this particular character that if you get expertise in nature, you might want that. But I like investigation. I like being able to find whatever it is that we want to find. We're an intelligence-based character, so that's my preference. All right, so for level 3, when we pick level 3 of Wizard, we're going to get level 2 spells. We're also going to get our Wizard subclass, and we're going to pick that School of Conjuration. That's going to give us Conjuration Savant and cut in half the time for scribing spells and cut the cost in half. It's okay. It's nice to have for conjuration stuff. And then starting at 3rd level, we're going to have this minor conjuration. So let's take a look at what that is and, potentially why there's this debate over the power level. Starting at 3rd level, when you select this school, you can use your action to conjure up an inanimate object in your hand or on the ground that you can see within 10 feet of you. The object can be no longer than 3 feet on a side, weigh no more than 10 pounds, and its form must be that of a non-magical object that you have seen. The object is visibly magical, radiating dim light out to 5 feet. It disappears after 1 hour when you use this feature again, or if it takes any damage or deals any damage. At first read, it seems pretty straightforward. I conjure something in my hand. But as with a lot of things in Dungeons & Dragons, when people start getting into the details of what it means, there's different interpretations. So what does it mean to be an object? An object is defined as a non-living thing. It cannot, so right there, anything that's alive, you can't summon a pet, you can't summon a weasel. It has to be a non-living, distinct thing. Some things are composite. A building is comprised of more than one object. Is a rapier an object? One person could say, yes, a rapier is an object. Another person could say, a rapier is not an object, because you have the rapier, it's got a blade, it's got a hilt, the handle's not made out of the same material, maybe it's got a cloth wrap around the handle, so it's multiple materials. You can't make a rapier, all you can make is a rapier blade. Well, getting into the details, could we just say that a rapier is an object? How about a shield? Is a shield a composite object, or could we just make a shield? It's only 6 pounds. It's less than 3 feet. It seems like it fits. How about a poison? Could we make a vial of poison? Is a liquid an object? What this means, if you make a rapier, it's going to shine with dim light. It's obviously magical. Could you then convince somebody that's a magical rapier and sell it for 400 gold? It's going to disappear after 1 hour. It's going to disappear if any damage is ever dealt with it. But if all they do is take it and put it in their bag, you'll probably be gone by the time they realize that it's not a real rapier. Does that work? How about a shield? If you take a shield into combat and the GM says the monster swings at you but misses, its mace connects with your shield. Well, it doesn't really take damage. There's not a mechanic in the game that says your shield takes 10 damage, right? But in a real sense, if you use the shield to deflect that mace, it should have taken damage and it should have disappeared. But it doesn't. So now it's getting more complicated, right? Poison. If you make a poison, it deals damage and then disappears. But you still get that one instance of damage, right? Because it has to do the damage before it disappears. So let's try to sort through this. What about spell components? Can you conjure 1,000 gold piece component and cast Hero's Feast? If you saw the captain of the guard wearing a key around his neck, could you make a copy of that key to unlock the gate? Can you summon food and water? What happens if you drink water and then you summon more water for a friend and the first water that you summon disappears? How do we handle this? So I'm going to present my engineering solution for it. And to set the stage for my solution, I'm going to bring our attention to Star Trek. They had replicators, but in that show, even the replicators had limitations. You might say, give me a Vorpal longsword, please. And the replicator would say, no, denied. I'm not going to let you create a sword that'll deal damage one time and maybe cut off something's head. That's not what it's intended for. So here's my engineering solution. I propose that whatever is made with minor conjuration is actually made of a magic substance. This is not rules as written. This is my solution, okay? So we're going to call this Magiplast. It's magical plastic. It can be shaped into an object whatever we conjure is made out of Magiplast. Okay? It can be a liquid. It could be a solid. It could even be a gas, I suppose, if you wanted it to be. It's going to have the form and function of the thing that you create. But it will not have any further properties that derive from that object by being a certain substance. Okay? So the faint glow and the obviously magical property are properties of this material. You can't get away from it. You can't create something that doesn't have the magical glow and isn't obviously magical, and I'm going to say that isn't obviously made out of this magical stuff. So, again, it's a substance. We can make something, take advantage of its form and function, but we can't use further properties. Let's go into detail on how that would actually play out in the game. If you tried to use this to conjure money, this one is red to me. You're not fooling anyone. Imagine that you try to make a quarter. If you made a quarter and you made it out of this material and you made it roughly the right weight, you could probably use it in a vending machine and get away with it. But if you took it into a store and put it on the counter and tried to convince somebody to take it, it would be glowing and obviously magical and obviously not made out of the metal that a quarter is made out of. Okay? So if the character in-game, if you're trying to make money, it doesn't work. Spell components. You can summon something that looks like a diamond, something that looks like the component for Hero's Feast. But it's not going to be made of diamond, it's going to be made of Magiplast. All right? Again, this solves the problem. When you cast a spell, you don't have a diamond to consume as the material component. All you have is something that looks like a diamond, which is not a diamond. I don't know if there's a ruling on this. Maybe there's some kind of official ruling that says you can do this, but I wouldn't allow it in my campaign. The spell itself is going to know the difference, and it's not going to successfully consume it, and the spell will fail. Weapons. Anybody familiar with weapons would know that it's not a normal weapon. This is a substance that's going to turn to powder after one hit. It still might be useful to make a weapon and get that one hit and do damage one time, but you're not reasonably going to be able to make it and sell it. I just don't want this to be some kind of money generation thing in the game. If you wanted to summon a poison, it would look like a poison, it would pour like a poison, you could put it on somebody's food. But the fact that a poison makes somebody sick or does damage to them is a further property, and this material doesn't have that further property. So it looks like poison, it pours like poison, maybe even smells like poison, but it doesn't actually poison anything. It's magical sawdust. Disappearing ink. Ink doesn't have any special properties other than it soaks into paper and makes a stain. We could take this feature, conjure some ink, and write a letter with it, let somebody read it, and then let the ink disappear. It could be a magic trick. It could be something to pass notes. It could be give somebody a mission, and should they choose to accept, and then the note self-destructs. What I wouldn't allow, medieval lawyers would probably know better than to make a contract for a castle written in some magical glowy ink. You could also make disappearing paint. Summon the paint, do some graffiti, distract the city guards. They go over to look at the graffiti, you sneak into the sewer, and then later the paint just disappears and it's a big mystery for everyone. That's fine. Food and drink. I think in most cases it would look, act, and feel like if you summoned an apple, it would look like an apple, feel like an apple, be the same weight as an apple. But if you bit into it, it would not be made of apple material. It would be made of Magiplast, and you'd basically be eating sawdust. Again, this isn't rules as written, but it solves the problem. You can make the apple, but it's not actually an apple. No nutritional value, doesn't help you not be hungry. If you summoned water, you can't really drink it. It'd be like drinking liquid sawdust, but you could pour it over your head, let it evaporate, and take advantage of the evaporation properties of water to cool yourself off. What this is then leaves as like the perfect window of opportunity. If you needed a bucket to carry water, it doesn't matter what the bucket's made out of, right? You make it out of this stuff, you make a pail, it could be metal, wood, Magiplast, whatever you want it to be, it doesn't matter. So we're taking advantage of the bucket from the form and function of a bucket. If you made a key, again, a key is a shape. It doesn't matter what it's made of, it doesn't have a special property. The key itself is meant to unlock a lock, so you could, as long as you've seen the key, and you could with detail replicate it, make the key, unlock the lock, works fine. If you wanted to make a shield, rules as written, make yourself a shield. It glows faintly and looks magical, but it works just like a normal shield. If you wanted to make a glass window, you could make a glass window and it would be see-through. It would have to be less than 3 feet on each side. If you made tools, you could make thieves' tools, for example. Should be fine. If you make smithing tools, once you start smashing metal to try to forge it, I would count that as taking damage. So maybe smith's tools isn't something that would work with this, but generally you could craft tools. If you suddenly needed to cover your face, you made a helmet, put a helmet over your face. Just be aware that it's obviously magical and glows, so you may attract more attention. It may not make you less obvious, it might make you more obvious. If you wanted to create a balloon and fill it with air and make it float, could you do that? I think so. A balloon is an object, the air inside of it is an object, so you should be able to make a balloon that's light and floats. It doesn't have any further properties beyond the fact that it's a balloon and it floats. Could you make a trap? You could make a trap, and it would do damage once. You could make a bear trap, but the bear trap wouldn't be easy to hide, right? Because it's glowing. You can make a sweater. It doesn't say that the thing has to be rigid, so you can make a sweater. You can make wings, but the wings aren't attached to anything and they don't make you fly. So this is my solution, right? And it's not necessarily that you have to play it exactly this way, but for me, it gives a framework, and then I can say anything that the player asks me about minor conjuration, can I do this? I can answer it very easily. Yes, you can make that thing, but it doesn't have any taste. It doesn't do, the extra effects that thing would do, but it has the form and function of the thing that you create. That's my solution. I think it's an easy way to handle this minor conjuration feat. It leaves a lot of room, a lot of clever things that a player could do with it, but it limits the more obvious abuses, and it stops players from trying to use it to make money that they don't deserve. All right. Let's say you and your GM really don't want to deal with conjuration stuff. My suggestion would be to play this wizard as an Order of the Scribes. It's my second favorite for this build. When you cast a wizard spell with a spell slot, you can temporarily replace its damage type with a type that appears in another spell in your spell book and magically alters the formula for the casting only. Level 2, for example, we get Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath has a poison damage feature, so any second level spell that we could cast as a poison-based damage. Third level, I don't know of any poison-based spells for third level. There is Stinking Cloud. It does create the poisoned condition, but it doesn't actually do poison damage. So that's between you and your GM if you could cast a poison fireball, because it doesn't really have the poison damage type. There's other spells, Cloud Kill at level 5, Shadow Dragon at level 6 or 7. So there's a bunch of spells that do have the poison damage feature. So with Order of the Scribes, you could have those in your spell book. And with Order of the Scribes, you could later take Elemental Adept for any given element and always be able to convert to fire or lightning, for example. I think there's spells of those levels. Bludgeoning, I think there's even bludgeoning that you can do at every single level of spell casting. So I think Order of Scribes is my second favorite for this build. And Order of Scribes overall is a more powerful class than Conjuration anyway. Second level spells, let's talk about that while we're here. Dragon Breath. This is going to be kind of our trademark damage spells for long combats with a few enemies. So at later levels, we'll get Fireball. If we get 3 or 4 enemies together, we're going to Fireball them every time. No questions asked, just launch the nuke. But if the enemies are coming in from different angles, if they're already surrounding you, maybe a Fireball is going to hit the party, maybe it doesn't fit in the room. There's reasons where Fireball is not really the right choice. Dragon's Breath is really good. We will get a feature that will allow us to ignore poison resistance, and if the characters that we're fighting are immune to poison, we simply pick a different damage type. So the flexibility in the spell is really good, and the damage is good. We can often catch 2 characters in the area of effect here. Getting 3 or 4 in one breath is hard, but getting 2 is pretty reasonable with just a little bit of movement. So we should be able to move, get 2 characters, and it's really good damage, and it's saved for half spell. Spells that save for half damage give you much more reliable damage. They're really good. It is concentration, so if you cast Web, you can't also cast Dragon Breath at the same time. So it does have that limitation, but basically it's like a Burning Hands style of effect, but you can do it every single round for 10 rounds. Its duration is a minute. There's 10 rounds in a minute, and every round you can do a magic action to create the effect. So it's a package of 10 Burning Hands in a row as long as you can maintain concentration. And for some fights, that's exactly what we're going to want to do. Web is another go-to second level spell. Again, it's a conjuration spell. We're a conjuration wizard. We're going to want it. It creates an area of difficult terrain in a 20-foot cube. The area is lightly obscured. The creature enters the webs or starts their turn there. Then they have to succeed on a dex save or have the restrained condition. The restrained character has disadvantage on their attacks. You have advantage against them. A restrained creature can make a strength check, athletics check, against the save DC. If it succeeds, it's no longer restrained. Webs are flammable, so if you do any fire-based spell, you will burn up your webs. There are times where that's exactly what you want to do. If you web a bunch of characters together, and then the moment that the party's ready to face those, you throw a fireball on them, they take the fireball damage, and then also the webs burn, dealing another 2d4 damage to any creature that starts its turn in the fire. So there are times where you might want to burn your own webs, but the enemy can also burn the webs and get rid of them. Anyway, it's one of the best control spells to control an area, stop enemy movement. We love it. We like it. It's conjuration. Also, when targeting, you conjure a mass of sticky webs at a point within range. Doesn't say a point you can see. Doesn't require line of sight. It's just a point within range. Good stuff if you're in obscurement. Enlarge, reduce. I'd give this spell a 4 out of 10. Situationally, it can be very useful. When it's exactly what you need, it's a 10 out of 10. You can enlarge your own party members. It gives them an extra d4 of damage. Also allows some grappling techniques to be used in certain cases. You can also reduce enemies. And our party is going to have a lot of push and topple. And the descriptions for push and topple say, do this to any creature that's large or smaller. If you're fighting a huge creature, you just can't do it. But if you're fighting a huge creature and you reduce them by one size category, now they're large and they're subject to push and topple and all those things once again. So at higher levels, it is a con save. So the likelihood that you're going to get it off on an unwilling target is reduced by the fact that it's a con save. But in the right circumstances, it's a spell that you want to have access to. If you know that you're going to be fighting huge creatures, you might want to have it prepared. So at level 3, when we get second level spells, at Wizard 3, we're going to get rid of Ice Knife and Witch Bolt. Dragon Breath is going to replace both. Ice Knife was our area of effect spell. Now Dragon Breath is going to be our area of effect. Witch Bolt was kind of our boss fight spell. Dragon Breath's now going to be our boss fight spell if we want it. We're going to pick up Web and Misty Step as well. We'll be able to get rid of Misty Step later, but for now, Misty Step is a 30-foot bonus action. You can teleport to a location that you can see. You'd have to see the spot that you're going to. But if you get grappled or put in a compromising situation, Misty Step is a get-out-of-jail-free card. You just teleport 30 feet away, and it's a good thing to have. It's good ripcord to have for a lot of casters. At Wizard 4, we get another spell. I would add Enlarge, Reduce to our prepared spell list at that point. As far as level 2 Spellbook goes, add all the stuff. Augury, Gentle Repose, Magic Mouth. Get those ritual spells. It costs money to buy the scrolls. It costs to scribe them in your book. It's expensive to be a wizard. But get these spells into your book so you can cast them as rituals. Remember, in combat, you only get one concentration spell. You can't do Web and then do Dragon's Breath. You can do Web and then shoot fireballs everywhere. You can be concentrating on Web and shoot poison spray everywhere. So just pay attention, because a lot of the best spells you get as a wizard are concentration spells, and you only get one of them. All right, let's go back to the character builder. and let's work through some more character building in D&D Beyond. So here we're going to pick those spells for second level. We're going to do a lot of the stuff that we talked about. We're going to pick Darkness, Fog, the Dragon's Breath, the Misty Step, the Web. Those things are going to be enabled, just like we talked about. And then I thought about putting Darkness on this character instead of Fog Cloud to be able to sort of duplicate Darkness. One caster puts down Darkness, and then we can put down another Darkness in a different area for party movement. But in the end, I think we don't really have a good use for our level 1 spells then, because the only thing we have left at level 1 is Featherfall and Shield, and if we're not using Shield or Featherfall, what are we going to do with our first level spells? How are we going to make use of them? So I think in the end, if we need the party to move, the party will be good in Heavy Obscurement as well as Darkness. So I think Fog Cloud at level 1, we keep that, and we don't mem Darkness on this character. Okay, so here we are taking our 4th level of Wizard, and we're going to take the Poisoner feat, and this is the second big step in our character's career. We get our character-defining feat, and now we're going to go have our second long discussion. All right, let's talk about what it means to be a Poisoner. General feat, have to be level 4 or higher to get it. Ability score increase our intelligence or dexterity by 1. We're going to pick intelligence, of course, take our intelligence to 18. Potent poison. When you make a damage roll that deals poison damage, it ignores resistance to poison damage. Period. A spell that deals poison damage now ignores resistance to poison damage. Great. If we want to poison dwarves, we can poison dwarves all day long. They have resistance to poison. We ignore it. With spells, with poisons, with anything where we are rolling poison damage. Nice. Brew poison. Lots of stuff in here, so let's go through it. We gain proficiency with a poisoner kit. We can use 1 hour of work and 50 gold pieces to make a poison, and we get enough doses equal to our proficiency bonus. That's 3 right now. It goes up with our proficiency bonus as we level up. As a bonus action, we can apply that poison to a piece of ammunition or a weapon. Once applied, it retains its potency for a minute or until we deal damage. So we can't put this poison on a bunch of stuff ahead of time and expect it to work. We pretty much have to use it within 1 minute of application. That's fine. When a creature takes damage from the poison, succeed on a con save. If it succeeds, nothing happens. If it fails, it takes 2d8 poison damage and has the poisoned condition until the end of the next turn. Our DC on this is right now 8. Our ability modifier is 4, and our proficiency bonus is 3. So it's a DC 15 save. It's pretty easy. I would say at 5th level, probably half the monsters will save half the time against this poison. So half the time it'll do 2d8 damage, and half the time it'll do absolutely nothing. But that's okay. We'll be happy. We'll be very happy with this poison as we go along. Dragon's Breath can easily be the character's trademark concentration spell for fights with multiple targets. It is a save for half spell, so if you do damage and the enemies save on their on that saving throw, it still does half damage, which is pretty good. It's got a small area of effect, but it does last for 10 turns, right? It's a full minute, and you can cast this little area of effect cone over and over again up to 10 times. If you can hit 3 or 4 targets with a fireball, you're always going to just drop the fireball on them. But there are situations where you're fighting multiple enemies, where the room is too small and fireball would kill all of your friends as well, or where there are things that would get set on fire that you don't want to set on fire. The fireball ignites things that aren't worn or otherwise owned by a character. So there are circumstances where fireball is not the tool that you want to use for the job. Just remember, if you can hit 2 targets for at least 3 turns, that's as good as fireball would have been against those 2 targets. It's not as fast, but in 3 turns you've made fireball damage, and then every turn after that it's stacking up. It's pretty easy to hit 2 targets with this, so I think it's a fun little thing for this particular character if you can get a couple enemies close. Poison Spray, short range, 30 feet. Remember, we're using Darkness and Obscurement. We're forcing the enemies to come to us to be able to fight. So 30 foot 30 feet should be plenty of range to frequently be in combat with the enemies. And anyway, the majority of monsters in D&D are melee attackers anyway, so they're going to want to get close. So the range on poison spray isn't an issue, and even if it was, we've still got True Strike with a short bow for much greater range, and it shouldn't be a problem. We should always have something that we can do. With the darkness and obscurement features that we're looking at, we should have advantage on almost every attack roll we make. And this is an attack roll spell with poison spray, so it's a reliable source of damage. That D12 damage die is looking pretty nice, 13 average damage on a hit. And we ignore resistance to poison. So that makes the poison damage type more acceptable than it would be on most builds. And we can always use True Strike and do radiant damage to anybody who's immune. Poisoner's Kit, intelligence-based item. We can detect a poisoned object with DC 10. We can also craft basic poison. We can look at the definition of that. Basic poison creates a vial of basic poison that coats one weapon or 3 pieces of ammunition. A creature that takes piercing or slashing damage, doesn't work on bludgeoning, takes an extra D4 of poison damage. Once applied, it lasts for a minute or until damage is dealt, whichever comes first. So you can't poison a dagger and then get 10 attacks over a minute that all do D4. Once damage is dealt, the effect is done. 50 gold pieces for 1 dose on a weapon or 3 pieces of ammunition for 50 gold pieces. But it is no save. There's no save against the damage. It just does an extra D4. And there's situations where if you really want a little bit of extra damage, D4 extra damage with no save is pretty good. And you do get 3 pieces of ammunition. 50 gold pieces for 3 doses of the poison you can make with the feat. 2d8, DC 15, save for none. Both the same cost. The payoff for this build. What is it that we're hoping to achieve? Why would we pick a poisoner build when we could have just taken elemental adept and done a fire build or anything else? Well, what it allows us to do is it allows us to make cheap poison, and we can enable this turn sequence where with our action and move, we do whatever we would normally do as a wizard. We don't have a bonus action requirement. We're not using Hex or Hunter's Mark or a bonus action attack or anything like that, right? So our bonus action is completely free. So what we can do, object interaction, take an arrow, bonus action, apply poison to it, and no action, you're just holding on to an arrow. You've got an archer in the group. On their turn, they do their object interaction to take the arrow away from you and shoot it. And it does poison damage. Now, the poison damage does transfer. Once the archer takes the arrow, it's their damage, not yours. So the benefit is if they get a critical hit, it doubles the poison damage. The poison DC is still whatever your DC was, that's defined. The drawback is if it hits a creature that's resistant to poison, it doesn't ignore resistance. The thing says specifically when you roll damage for poison. So once you give it away, it no longer ignores resistance. It's a small drawback. But that's the payoff. The feat doesn't say that you have to hold the poison in one hand and an arrow in the other. It doesn't say that you need a free hand. It just says you apply poison as a bonus action. If it breaks your brain to think about a character with a shield in one hand and an arrow in the other, and how do they manage to poison that as a bonus action, just be aware that Crossbow Expert says you can hold a crossbow in each hand and ignore the loading property of crossbow. So you can take 4 shots with both hands full and somehow load 4 arrows into those crossbows. It makes absolutely no sense, but it works. It's allowed. So this is similar. It just happens. If you want to apply this poison as a bonus action, you do. No freehand requirements, no crazy stuff. Rules as written. So the whole thing where it says you can apply poison as a bonus action isn't really that much of a benefit. If you look at the Dungeon Master's Guide, it says that an injury poison can be applied as a bonus action to a weapon, piece of ammunition, or similar object. The poison remains potent until washed off or you deliver a wound. A creature that takes piercing or slashing damage is exposed to its effect. So if everybody can apply poison as a bonus action, why is it defined within the feat? And the answer is, inside the feat, when it defines the 2d8 poison, it never says that it's an injury poison. and it doesn't say that you can give that poison away. So it kind of implies that you make your own poison, you kind of have to use your own poison, and you can apply it as a bonus action. So the feat just clarifies all that stuff and makes sure that it's clean. So Zarna, our character, can brew the standard 2d8 con save poison for 50 gold pieces, makes it basically 17 gold pieces per shot for 3 doses. Later we'll get better proficiency, so more doses. But what this is going to allow, the character can now fully double dip on damage. Poison spray is going to do 13 damage, which is not bad, but then we're also going to enable 9 extra damage for our archer. So if we add those two things together, we could potentially get 13 for our own cantrip, another 22 from the archer. If we cast a fireball, of course, we'll get 122,603 damage from the fireball, plus an extra 9 from the arrow. I may have exaggerated the fireball damage slightly, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, we can cast whatever wizard spell we were normally going to cast, or we can do a cantrip. And for sustained damage, cantrip, poison, if we have the poison available to give out. So if we compare that to other purpose-built damagers, you could look at an Agonizing Blast Warlock build. By level 5, they get 2 bolts, d10 plus 4 damage. That's 19 damage if they both hit. And let's say Hex is up half the time. It would take that to about 23 damage around. That's pretty sustainable. If you build a character with Shillelagh and Booming Blade, that would do 2d8 plus 4 damage for 13 damage on a hit. Same as our Poison Bolt. Our Poison Bolt does as much damage as the Booming Blade hit. They get another 9 damage if the enemy moves, and that would take them to 22. We're getting another 9 damage if the poison hits. So I think, it's equally likely that the enemy moves as it is that the poison works. Okay, maybe it's more likely that they move. But anyway, it puts us on par with purpose-built damage dealers, and we never gave up something for it. We used our origin feat for skill stuff. We used our wizard spell expertise for something else. We used our fighting ability for something else. We gave up nothing to be at the same damage level as other purpose-built cantrip-based casters. That's not bad, right? So maybe the poisoner feat is better than people give it credit for, if you got a friend that can help you use it. Let's talk about poisons, and let's talk math. Some people who like poisons, some people who don't like poisons are probably going to get upset at some point in this conversation, but I'm going to present both sides of it from what I consider to be a factual, mathematical standpoint. Applied poison is a weak mechanic in the game. Proven. It's math. So let's talk about it. If a monster is trying to poison you with a DC 14 poison that does a lot of damage, you're going to hate it when you have to roll that DC 14 con save, right? For player characters, unless you have a character that's purpose-built to succeed in con saves, even at relatively low thresholds, it can be oppressive. If that poison then had a 19 DC, characters would be dying right and left to everything that poisons, okay? So to balance out the game mechanics, the monsters in the game that have poison usually has a relatively low DC for the spell, for the particular level that we're at. When you flip that around and you harvest the poison off of that monster and then you try to kill an enemy with it, enemies in the game have very high constitution scores. Most monster class creatures are considered to have proficiency with constitution saves, so their constitution saving throws are very high. So whereas you at level 8 might be nervous about a DC 14 save against poison, a monster at the same level has plus 11 to plus 13 in that range to their con saves, and they're making that save on a 3 or better. So when I say that it's underpowered, it's not an opinion, it's the mathematics of the game. The DC is meant to be balanced for affecting characters, and therefore monsters that have high con saves aren't really affected by poisons as much as you would hope they would. Okay, so again, I'm presenting a balanced point of view, so if you like poisons, hang on. I'm going to get to your part of this in a second. Wyvern poison, and Purple Worm Poison are the standout poisons. They have injury, save for half mechanic. They offer guaranteed damage. If you look at the cost, 2,000 gold pieces gives you 1 dose of Purple Worm Poison. Does 35 damage on average in the 2024 rules. That's cut back from 42 average damage in the old rules for 2014. It would be 17 on a save. Think about applying this 3 times. We want to shoot 3 arrows that all have poison on them, and we want to get a quick kill. Monsters at this level are probably going to succeed on 2 out of 3 of the saves. So 35 when they fail, 17 when they succeed. That puts you at a nice 70 damage for the low price of 6,000 gold pieces. Let me remind you, you could buy a +2 weapon for 4,000 gold pieces. You could craft 3 +2 items for 6,000 gold pieces. Getting 70 damage is insanely inefficient. That's crazy. The idea that you would give up 6,000 gold pieces for 70 damage is a weak mechanic, okay? But now, to take the other side of the coin, if we put the cost aside and we say, okay, by whatever means, our party has gotten these poisons, and now we look at it as a burst damage tactic. When you look at it this way, statistically, it's insanely overpowered because there is no action. Remember, we can apply these poisons, and they are effective until used or washed off. So if you had 20 doses of Purple Worm Poison, you could apply it to 20 different arrows, and you could carry those arrows with you around you for 2 years, and whenever you use them, they're going to be fully effective. Let's look at an Adult Red Dragon. CR 17 monster, AC 19, 256 hit points, +13 con save. Against that Purple Worm Poison, DC 21 save. 7 results will fail, 13 results will succeed. Basically a 2/3 chance to succeed. So we would be right at that 70 damage on 3 doses. But 70 damage represents 27% of the creature's hit points. Just over a quarter of their hit points just from those 3 doses of poison. Whoever was shooting those arrows was doing damage with those arrows anyway. If this fight would have taken 4 rounds, it's now going to be maybe 2 rounds, right? That 70 damage represents a huge chunk of this creature's hit points. And maybe getting this fight over extremely quickly is worth 6,000 gold pieces. So we have to balance those 2 things. We have to keep both of those things in mind. Poison's a weak mechanic. It's not worth it in terms of gold pieces. However, the fact that it's pre-applied and it takes no action to activate and the damage comes on top of what's already being done anyway can be overpowering. Okay, let's talk about how to get these poisons. A character can attempt to harvest a poison from a venomous creature that's dead or has the incapacitated condition. So now, because of the way this is all wording, we got poisoner kit, we got skill, we got the feat, all this stuff, right? So we're going to be able to make our poison, but we're also going to be able to find it from plants and animals out in the field. We can attempt to harvest a poison from a venomous creature that's dead or has the incapacitated condition. It takes 1d6 minutes, a DC 20 intelligence nature check using the poisoner kit. We have the kit, we have intelligence, we have the nature skill, check. DC 20 is high though. On a successful check, the character harvests exactly 1 dose. No additional poison, so 1 purple worm, 1 dose. 6 purple worms, 6 doses. That's what it says in the rules. If the character fails the check by 5 or more, it's subjected to the creature's poison. We're going to not really care, right? We are resistant to poison damage, so even if we get affected by it, we're only taking half damage. So if we saved against purple worm poison, we'd be taking 8 damage from it. We don't care. We're always going to try to harvest this, and that dwarf racial species feature there is kicking in. Fantastic. It does say that it's incapacitated, so you don't necessarily have to kill it. If you want to knock out a creature and incapacitate it, harvest its poison and let it catch and release, it's fine. You can do that. It might have some implications for farming wyverns later in the game or something. Can you get truly free poisons from your familiars? So there's an issue here that I'll just present both sides of the argument, and you can decide how you would do it at your table. Familiars change their type to Fey, Fiend, or Celestial, but it doesn't mean that they're not a creature. They're still, in fact, a creature. Familiars have poisons, would meet the definition of a venomous creature. However, if they're dead, they disappear, so you can't harvest their poison. If they're incapacitated, how are you going to incapacitate them without taking them to 0 hit points? You can't do non-lethal damage because they would disappear. I don't know of something in the game that you can say, I'm going to be voluntarily incapacitated for 5 minutes. You can cast a sleep spell on something, but it lasts 1 minute maximum. So, again, if you know of a way, leave it in the comments down below. Tell me, I'm curious. But I don't know of a way that you could voluntarily be incapacitated for long enough to harvest a poison. But that's between you and your GM. So I would probably allow it with your familiar once a day. Examples, Scorpion, DC 9, 1d8, save for half. Most creatures are going to auto-save on a DC 9, so that will actually be 2 damage on average. But okay, it's 2 damage, right? It's 2 damage that you can get once per day for free, completely for free from your familiar, if you have a Scorpion familiar. Used to be that Poison Snake was on the list. In the 2024 list, the Poison Snake is a CR 1/8 monster, and it defines with Find Familiar it can only be a CR 0 monster. Snake's not on the list, and maybe it won't be on the list as a familiar anymore. But again, it depends on your table. Warlocks can have Pact of the Chain. They can have an Imp familiar. Imps have a poison that's DC 11, 3d6 save for half. That's actually a really good poison. If your DM allows you to harvest that, I would definitely get a dose a day from an Imp. That would be pretty good. Pretty fantastic. And then the uses. Be careful with the uses. The basic poison, a lot of players have the player's handbook, but they don't have the Dungeon Master Guide. So if you look in the player's handbook, the only reference you're going to find to this is the basic poison, or at least the only reference that I find to it. And it says you can do 1 weapon or 3 pieces of ammunition. That implies that you could always do with a poison 1 weapon or 3 pieces of ammunition. But in fact, this seems to be unique to the basic poison, because in the DMG, it says you can apply the poison to 1 item or 1 piece of ammunition, right? Injury poison can be applied to a weapon or a piece of ammunition. That's from the DMG though, right? So I think that's specific only to basic poison. So yeah, 1 dose equals one hit. Conclusions. Anybody can apply an injury poison as a bonus action. Because injury poisons like Wyvern Poison and Purple Worm Poison last until used, I have no idea why you would ever use it as a bonus action in combat. But for this character, the brew poison doses and the basic poison doses only last a minute once they're applied. So you do have to apply them in combat, and the brew poison doses can be applied as a bonus action with the feat. Cleared. Harvesting is going to be difficult for anybody. Even the character like this one with nature skill and high int, DC 20 check is no joke. Also, I'll just say poison is statistically weak, but allowing any character to have a whole lot of doses is broken. Let's say your character has 20 arrows. They've got them all coded ahead of time. I'm just going to use the Whistler character that I just put out last week. At level 13 or more, 3 shots per attack sequence. Fighter, extra attack, 3 hits. Action Surge gets us another attack sequence of 3 shots. If we had 6 poison arrows to spend, that character would do about 150 damage with the 6 arrows, and would do an extra 140 damage with the poison from the 6 coded arrows. Folks, that's 290 damage. That character killed an adult red dragon on its turn. 1 turn. It didn't last a round. It lasted 1 character's action and died on the fighter's initiative. Be careful with this. Now, if it took, 8 levels of play, and that were the only 6 arrows that the party had, that's a pretty good memory, killing a red dragon in 1 hit. But if the party has enough arrows to do that again in the next combat, and then again next week, don't allow that. don't allow it. It's outside of the game mechanics. Let's get back to the build. At level 5, we can make a bastion. We'll do a workshop to have synergy with jewel crafting. It can provide the help action for us while we're at the bastion, so cut our crafting time in half. A garden can make money or poison, so we can use that. At level 9, we get a greenhouse, more poison options. Teleportation circle or scriptorum fits with the character, so you could do that. And then a menagerie at level 13. If you can convince your game master to let you keep some wyvern in your menagerie, that might be fun. Then you could knock them out and harvest their poison once every now and then. But okay, those are dreams for later. Let's talk about 3rd level spells while we're here. Fireball, big area, doesn't require line of sight, and detonates in a big range, right? So it goes from to a point that we choose within range and creates a 20-foot radius sphere. 20-foot radius is big, 8d6 is good damage, and it doesn't require us to see the location. Check, check, check. Everything we want. Definitely going to have Fireball on our list. Summon Fae. With this particular build, you would think Summon Fae would be perfect. They have a Trixie feature, and in the Trixie stat block, it says that they can fill a 10-foot cube with magical darkness. So we could cast darkness. They could put out little patches of darkness. The problem is, in actual play, they can't see in the darkness. They don't have something that lets them see through it. So they can block line of sight with the darkness, for example, but they'll be out in the open, and any enemies with ready to attacks will just kill them on sight as soon as they come out of the darkness. So even if you have them running in and out of your own darkness and casting these little spots of darkness, for the damage that they do, 2d6 plus 3 plus the spell level force damage, that's 13 average damage. We're doing that with a poison spray cantrip. I don't see why we would burn up our concentration on a spell that does damage like a cantrip. So it seems good. It's a conjuration spell, but I wouldn't be able to justify using it. Now let's talk about slow. I believe slow is the most potent 3rd level control spell in the game. And again, that's based on math. If you were ever played a high level fighter and you get a slow cast on you, I'm telling you right now, you will feel absolutely useless. Your move speed is cut in half. And when you take the attack action, you get 1 attack. You get -2 to your armor class, -2 to dexterity save. You can't take reactions, and you can either take a bonus action or an action, not both, and 1 attack if you take the attack action. It's so much stuff. So let's say we cast Hypnotic Pattern. Let's look at Hypnotic Pattern. You create a twisting pattern of colors, 30-foot cube. It appears for a moment and vanishes. Creatures who fail a saving wisdom save have a charmed condition, and they incapacitated with speed 0, so they basically stand there drooling thinking about the pretty colors. The spell ends if they take damage or if anybody else uses an action to shake them out of the stupor. So let's say in that 30-foot cube you can affect 5 creatures. If 2 of them save, they'll go wake up 2 other creatures, and you'll basically only spend 1 turn. It wastes some time. It's situationally, it can be useful. I've heard people talk about how great this is. It does have a 120-foot range, so you can reach out a long way with this spell. So it's not bad, but I don't like it as much as other people like it. Slow also has a 120-foot range, and it's a 40-foot cube instead of a 30-foot cube, and it's 6 targets. And those 6 targets are absolutely debilitated. Imagine that you're slowed to half your movement. The party has stuff that can make you prone. They also have stuff that can do a slow effect to make you lose movement. If your movement is half, and you're prone, and you're slowed, you can't even stand up. You just lay there on the ground wishing you weren't slow. Imagine a dragon or a creature that would normally attack you 3 or more times in a turn. It takes the attack action, makes 1 attack. The threat level goes from 9 to 2. The characters affected by slow are like giant punching bags with a frowny face, and your party can just do damage until they die. I'm telling you. Hear me now, believe me later. Super powerful spell. Stinking Cloud is another thing worth looking at. So Stinking Cloud creates an area, 20-foot radius sphere, so we're back in that 40-foot range, right? Like the other spell, like slow we were talking about, 40-foot cube. This is a 20-foot radius sphere. Heavy Obscurement, that's good. We can remember, we can use blind sight to see through Heavy Obscurement. We don't care about it. But the enemy's stuck in Heavy Obscurement. The cloud lingers in the air until it's blown away. Each creature starts its turn, must make a Constitution save or have the poisoned condition. While poisoned, the creature can't take an action or bonus action. So if they fail the save, all they can do is move out. If they succeed on the save, they can move out and they still get their action. But then, we got a lot of push effects. We could probably knock them back in. This creates an area where the enemies won't want to be. There's interesting situations where maybe you can't get to an enemy. They're in a fortified position. You can't really get a spell in there. You can cast the spell nearby. It will fill the entire 20-foot radius sphere, including their little bunker. Once they're in Heavy Obscurement, they can't see out of it to target you anymore. They have the choice to either sit there choking or they can leave their little area of security. If they choose not to leave, you can basically walk up to them with your group, target them through the Heavy Obscurement with Blind Sight or Tremor Sense, and make short work of them if they don't leave. So situationally, it can be pretty cool. I would take Fireball and Stinking Cloud at level 5. I could also make an argument for Fireball and Slow and then bring Stinking Cloud on later. But at Wizard level 6, we're going to get the Benign Transportation. We can drop Misty Step off. So by 6th level, we should have Fireball, Stinking Cloud, Slow, and I say Dispel Magic. But there's, again, your prepared spells can be whatever you want for your character. None of these are a must-do. With 3rd level spells, Leomund's Tiny Hut, it's a must-have ritual. It secures your rest, long rest in the middle of a dungeon crawl, gives you a space to sleep. Phantom Steed, Water Breathing. Water Breathing requires a reed, so the material component's very small, and it lasts for 24 hours. So if your GM is willing to agree to it, you could just say, I cast it as a ritual. It doesn't take a spell slot. It doesn't take a meaningful material component. I just cast it every morning, and we have water breathing on all the time. 9 days out of 10, maybe 99 days out of 100, you don't care. But that one day where you're suddenly dunked underwater, you have water breathing on. Fill your spell book with all the good things. Fly, Gaseous Form, Major Image, Remove Curse, Sending. There are so many good wizard spells to get. So get them, put them in your spell book, swap them out when you need to. It can get expensive being a wizard, but worth it. All right, let's go back to the character builder just for a minute and take a look at the further build and see where this is going. All right, so we got the Poisoner feat. We would want to upgrade to a breastplate, of course, sometime in here. We would probably want to upgrade to a better shield. The Gem of Seeing, the Arcane Grimoire, those are the kind of magic items that we're looking for in this character. All right, let's come in and make our character wizard level 5, and we'll go look at 3rd level spells here. We'll pick all the ones that I talked about. Flame arrows is also an interesting thing to look at. You can make a quiver magical so that when ammunition is pulled out of it, does an extra d6 of damage, but it's limited to 12 arrows. And if you could only do an extra 12 d6 over the entire duration of the spell, you're going to do more damage than that with a lot of other things that you could do. So that's not worth a spell slot. I don't like it. Stinking Cloud we're going to take, of course. That's one of our signature spells that we're going to want. And we can fill our spell book up with a bunch of this other stuff. Hypnotic Pattern. All right, going to level 6 with the Benign Transportation. Let's take a look at that. Starting at 6th level, you can use your action to teleport 30 feet to an unoccupied space that you can see. Alternately, you could choose a space within range that's occupied by a small or medium creature. If that creature is willing, you swap places. Okay, so we all know Misty Step. It's a 30-foot teleport to a place that you can see. It's a 2nd level spell, and it takes a bonus action. This is a teleport effect, 30 feet. You can swap places with an ally, but it does take your action. In return for taking your action, it is not a spell. So maybe that's relevant if you want to cast a spell that's cast as a bonus action, for example. You could still do that. But Benign Transportation lets us get Misty Step off of there. If we're ever in such a desperate situation that we just need to be out of there, it's worth taking our action to leave. Let's say we're grappled by a monster that we really, really, really don't want to be grappled by. obviously going to be worth our action to get away. And it allows us to free up a prepared slot. If you really want Misty Step to stay in your repertoire, that's fine. You can always Misty Step and cast Poison, a spray or something like that as a cantrip. It's up to you. I'm going to take it off of my list. The swapping places thing is mediocre, but maybe you're in a situation where you're in a really good position for tanking and your tank is not, and it's the other way around. Like they've been restrained or held monstered or whatever it is. I don't know, something where held monster is not a good example. But anyway, if you wanted to trade positions with your tank, maybe it's a good thing to do. Swap spots. So it's an interesting feature. I would give it a 4 out of 10. Just because it lets us take Misty Step off the prepared list, not because it's that good of a feature. Otherwise, it's basically Misty Step with a trade function. 4th level spells, well, we could talk about those separately. Let's go out and have a look at 4th level spells. Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound. This spell, for normal adventuring, I would give it a 2 out of 10. It's clunky, it's hard to use, but it does last 8 hours, and it is a Conjuration spell. And the way that we're going to run this particular party, this is useful. It could be a 7 or 8 out of 10. So what we're going to do, we're going to summon this mystical watchdog. In order to move it at all, the only way that it can move, it doesn't have a movement speed of its own. The only way we can move it is to use a magic action to move it 30 feet. If something starts within 5 feet at the start of your turn, if there's an enemy within 5 feet, it can try to bite. The enemy gets a saving throw, dexterity saving throw, or take 48 force damage. That's 18 average damage. That's not bad, but it gets a saving throw against it. So if we were trying to use this as a damage source, it's pretty awful, right? You have to move it on your turn, and then you have to wait until your next turn and hope that an enemy is still close when you start your next turn. So if you're trying to use this as a damage source, bad. But we're going to be operating in darkness or obscurement. We're going to be making enemies come to us, so we can often park this dog with the melee characters, and if something gets into melee combat with our tanks, it's going to often be within 5 feet of the dog. In that case, the damage is completely for free. It doesn't take any action, bonus action, move, nothing. As long as it's within 5 feet of something, it bites it for 48 force damage. 4d8. So in this particular group, if we position the hound correctly, we probably only have to move it once in a fight, and maybe we could get 2 or 3 bites over the course of the fight. It's totally free damage. If you're using your dog to explore, when it gets within 30 feet of an enemy, it'll start to bark. It has true sight. So let's say you know that there's some enemies in the next room, and you would love to ambush them. You're going to make them come to you. You're going to trigger an ambush, do a bunch of ranged attacks. It's going to be great. How do you get the enemies to come to you? With this dog. Move it 30 feet. Move it 30 feet. Move it. Oh, hey, it's within 30 feet of the enemy. It starts to bark. It can't be seen. They don't know where it's at. It's invisible. It's invulnerable. It's unattackable. It's not affected by spells. They're just as barking. The enemy doesn't know what's going on. Now you move the dog. The barking moves. The enemies probably come to investigate. You move the dog. The enemies move. As soon as they come around the corner, ambush, triggered, fantastic. Let's go. The dog's there in the middle. As the enemies come toward you, probably get some bites. It's not great, but man, would it be fun. It's sort of like with 9 out of 10 characters, this spell would never work. With this particular character and party build, it would work. And I love it when things that don't normally work are enabled. So I like the Hound. Everid's Black Tentacles. This is basically a web that gets damage. It does take a 4th level spell slot though, so we can't just say we're going to take Everid's Black Tentacles and kick off web, because we probably get only 1 or 2 Everid's a day. So squirming black tentacles fill a 20-foot square on the ground for the duration. It's difficult terrain. Again, just like web. On a failed save, they make a strength saving throw. So again, in Web, they were making a dexterity throw. Here they're making a strength save. On a fail, 3d6 bludgeoning damage, restrained. Okay? Restrained creature can take its action to make a strength athletics check against your DC, same as Web. But that 3d6 bludgeoning damage is pretty nice. So there's times where we want to web an enemy and also get damage. This is a cool way to do it. Also, it's a conjuration spell. With the Conjuration School of Magic at level 10, we can't lose concentration on a conjuration spell from damage. So once we pass Wizard 10, spells like Everard's Black Tentacles can't get interrupted by damage. They can get interrupted if we're made unconscious or put to sleep or some effect like that. But just from damage, conjuration spells are 100% full duration. So that's why we want some of these on our prepared list. Even if they're not the best spell for that particular level, if they're conjuration and we can guarantee concentration, it's looking pretty good. Locate creature. I love the interaction between locate creature and dimension door. Locate creature lets you know the exact location. Dimension door says that you can just describe where you want to go within 400 feet, 500 feet, and you just go there. So if your buddy's in prison, you locate them, you know exactly where they're at. You dimension door in, grab them. You could take a person with you when you dimension door, and just dimension door right back out. So, yeah, I mean, it's multiple 4th level slots, but you can do some pretty interesting things with that. Polymorph is a go-to spell. Everybody loves Polymorph. It gives temporary hit points equal to the beast form. So if you give your warlock in the party this beast form, they'll get temporary hit points equal to whatever that beast is. And just be aware that if your warlock is using Armor of Agathis, or let them know that you're going to polymorph them, they can put up Armor of Agathis. Armor of Agathis says anytime something hits you with melee damage, it reflects back a bunch of damage back at them. At reasonable, warlocks, by the time they get level 5 spells, it's going to be reflecting 25 damage per hit. It's effective. The way the new rules are written, Armor of Agathis is in effect as long as they have temporary hit points. So if you can give them a ton of temporary hit points with Polymorph, Armor of Agathis lasts until all those temporary hit points are gone. You can't stack temporary hit points, but you can make Armor of Agathis last a really long time. You can also polymorph enemies. Don't polymorph them into an ant. Ants, 1 hit point of damage, the polymorph breaks. If you polymorph them into something like a blue whale, it takes up a lot of space. It has no land-based movement, so it can't actually move at all. And it takes a ton of damage to break the polymorph spell. And you can, of course, quit concentrating on it whenever you want. So be clever with your polymorph spells if you want to have that. It's pretty cool. So I would suggest your prepared list includes Mordecai's Faithful Hound and Polymorph. I think those are the options that I like. Again, Everard's Black Tentacles and stuff like that are good. You might want them on there. At level 8, I would do Dimension Door, and you can play around with these spells however you like for your wizard. And remember to always grab your rituals, right? Arcane Eye, Control Water, Divination, Stone Shape are all good 4th level spells. Make sure you get them in your spellbook so that you can swap out when you need to. So by this time, we're level 8 with this character. Out of combat, we have expertise in investigation. We've got Arcana skill, all of our rituals. Detecting magic, identifying items, Leomund's tiny hut, summoning a steed if we need to send a messenger back to town. There's so many things, right? In social settings, we're going to be observant. In combat, it's going to be, if we can set up ahead of time with the Gem of Seeing, that'll let us see through darkness. That's nice. If we can have the Hound up, that's cool. If we can hand out some poison arrows, remember they last 1 minute, so we can potentially hand out a couple of those ahead of time. They are, 17 gold pieces each at this level, so be careful how many of them you give away. But it's free damage for your archer. Pick your best, so in combat, again, it's just kind of a 3-step process. You're going to pick your best concentration spell. In really hard fights, slow is going to be what you're going to pick. Slowing a monster is really effective. And they may shake off the slow within a turn or two. They get a save every turn. But if you can slow a monster for 2 or 3 turns, it's worth the spell slot, and then you can recast whatever you want for a new concentration spell. There's a paladin in this group. If you're playing with a paladin, park yourself within 10 feet. Make sure you stay in that protection aura. Don't be stingy with fireball. Throw that thing out. But don't throw out 3 fireballs in one combat, right? Fireball is the kind of thing where you use it right away to soften up targets, to make it easier to focus damage and kill targets, get a couple off the field. But there's not many combats where 2 or 3 fireballs in a row is going to be the right thing to do. Save your spell slots as needed, but don't be stingy with them either. Get that damage out there. I'd play the character with a shield and nothing in the other hand, so that should work. You can cast a spell with your free hand. You can dip an arrow in poison with your free hand. If the GM does require 2 free hands, put the shield away. It's not that big of a deal. It's not worth getting Warcaster on this character. For items, again, that Arcane Grimoire to get plus on our spell attacks and plus to DC if we can get it. Gem of Seeing is pretty cool if we can have that. Eventually, Staff of Power is something we would like. Maybe level 10 to 14 in that range. Maybe we could pick up a Staff of Power. That also adds to our attack roll, and it stacks with the Grimoire, so that's nice. Let others in the party get better items. This character is so easy to play, it doesn't require any items. If you get items, it's great. If you don't get items, it's whatever. Help the other characters in your party that benefit more from their items. You could do an Ioun Stone of Intellect if you wanted to. We'll talk about feat options, and that could be something we want to look at. So if we're talking about damage at this level, it's hard to say. You know, wizards have a lot of flexibility. They can do damage when it's required. They can control when it makes more sense. And webbing 2 targets is probably better in a lot of cases than trying to do damage. But with that poison arrow trick, we can often do damage with our turn and then hand off extra damage to the archer. The higher we get in levels, the more likely it is that that doesn't do anything. But it's free. In terms of our action economy, we're not using the bonus action for something else. For all of this obscurement, remember, we got True Sight to see through darkness. We've got Blind Sight 10 feet to always see the party. As a bonus action, we can always pick up 60 foot of Blind Sight from our bat if we need to. We've got Tremor Sense with the dwarf to know where things are. And we use a lot of spells that don't care. They don't need us to see the targets. We cast them at an area. We identify where the spell is going, and that's it. So in terms of role play by level 8, we're pretty much... At level 2, we were a fighter that was starting to take some spells. At level 3 and 4, we're a fighter with some spells. At level 8, we're a wizard in armor, right? So we've made that transition. We're a spellcaster. That's how we're doing our damage. And we just happen to be able to wear armor and a shield. So at this level, you know, if you're faced with an enemy, we've got this situation where the party's attacking these mercenaries that we're planning to ambush. And Zarna would kind of be laughing to herself. You know, she's making jokes again. You know, the mercenaries love their campfire, so maybe they want more fire, right? It's funny to her. She probably laughs at that joke. And she guides this little floating mote of magic toward the campfire and then detonates this gigantic sphere of green fire. I think her fireballs are green. She likes poison, yellows and greens, and maybe some orange would be fantastic. So again, the game doesn't say that your fireball has to look like a ball of fire. Do whatever you want. It does fire damage, but there's no reason it can't be green. Make it fun. The enemies are going to run around. The clothes are on fire. Lingering flames are burning everywhere. And the rest of the group springs into action. And then Zarna's just kind of chilling. Maybe she sends the dog into combat. Maybe she conjures a net. You know, thinks to herself, hey, maybe I can capture somebody. Minor conjuration, a net. Again, the form and function of a net are fine. It works. If the net takes damage, it falls off anyway. It always falls off. But yeah, so one big spell and then just kind of chill out and clean up. Feats at Wizard 8 and 12. As you keep building this character past, you know, these low levels, we talked a lot about this character. The video's gone long already, but we're pretty much done, right? So by the time you've set your character and you've got your gimmick and you know the theme, from here on out, we're just going to talk a little bit about feats and spells and wrap it up. At 8 and 12, the feats are going to be important. If you're in a campaign setting, and maybe it's a low gear campaign setting or crafting's not allowed, just take the +2 int. You really want this character to max out at 20 intelligence as soon as possible. So do that. If an Ioun Stone is available, you could make it or buy it for intelligence. That could be your 3rd attunement item on this character. And that would allow you to take Spell Sniper and later Elemental Adept. And those 2 feats together would give you 20 intelligence. and it's going to be much better to have that than to just take the ability score improvement all at once. But again, it depends on your campaign and your GM. At 12, if you took your intelligence to 20 at level 8, then at 12 I would take that resilient wisdom, round our wisdom out to 14. Now we get wisdom as a proficient save. We get our wisdom up to 14 for a +2 bonus to wisdom spells and saves. So it protects your character against some of the more nasty effects at higher level. If we took Spell Sniper at level 8, then do Elemental Adept here for fire to make sure that your Fireball, Wall of Fire, Incendiary Cloud, Meteor Swarm, there's tons of stuff that does fire. If you took the Order of Scribes, you could take whatever you want here. Warcaster is one of the best feats in the game, but because Conjuration gets at Wizard level 10, concentration can't be interrupted by damage. Then I think one of the best parts of Warcaster is it doesn't even matter. So if we would wait till character level 8 to get this feat, and then at level 10 we're just immune to concentration breaks, it's a waste of a feat. This can be abused in the 2024 rules. The way Attack of Opportunity is written, it says when a creature leaves your zone, which it doesn't define as enemy anymore. So now there's players who are doing drive-by buffs. You run by your wizard, and as you run out of their zone, the wizard makes an Attack of Opportunity with Warcaster and casts haste. I am strictly against this. I would never allow an Attack of Opportunity against an ally to cast a buff. That is ridiculous. It's rules as written, but it's not the intent. I wouldn't allow it. I don't like it. I wouldn't use it on this character. Again, if I was playing the character, but I'm telling you, in case abuse is allowed at your table, you can take advantage of it if you want. Synaptic Static at Wizard 9. It's a fireball with benefits. It's an int save, which is better than a dex save. 8d6 psychic damage, so the damage isn't, let's say, an increase from fireball, but you get these lingering effects. So enemies affected by it have -1d6 to attack rolls. That's huge. That's even bigger than Bane. They have -1d6 to ability checks and saves for concentration, without this being a concentration spell itself. You cast it once, it goes off, the effects linger, it is not concentration. Fantastic spell. Cloud Kill is Conjuration spell and also poison damage type, fits the character perfectly. Yolanda's Regal Presence is another abusable spell. It's a Spirit Guardians-like effect. It causes things to be damaged and knocked prone. And again, you can abuse that within the 2024 rules. On your turn, walk around and hit a bunch of creatures with it, and then ready an action so that as soon as your turn is over, you do it again and hit those creatures again. And then your ally takes a turn, and they grapple you and drag you and hit the creatures again. I don't think that's the way the spell was intended to be used. If you want to abuse it, you can. But I wouldn't even take it on this character because I don't like abuse. Steel and Strike is interesting. It's a multi-target kind of burst damage thing that you could do. You make attack rolls against, I think, 5 targets within range. It does have this little forced teleport at the end where you have to end up within 5 feet of one of the things that you attack, but it could be okay. Summon Fiend is interesting. Devils have Devil's Sight. They go great in darkness. It's a spell you can look at. Eye Bite could be interesting for the role play of a creepy person with a mechanical eye. Incendiary Cloud, if you took Elemental Adept, this is good. It creates an area of effect and does damage. It's all the things we're looking for. At the highest level, take a look at Sword of Disaster. That's kind of an interesting spell. It is Conjuration, so we have guaranteed concentration on it. It does 2 attacks per turn. It's reasonable sustained damage. In certain boss fights, it might actually be what we want to go for. Of course, it's in competition with the spell like Wish, so would you rather have a Sword of Disaster or have a Wish? Maybe some people would rather have a Wish. There's also Simulacrum, all the usual high-level powerful spells. No need to talk about them here. If you're playing at that level, you probably already know what they do. Okay, level 14 to 20 in combat. Again, people struggle with wizards. They take 5 minutes on their turn to pick their best spell. They're looking through their stuff. They're trying to figure out what to do. I don't understand why. It doesn't need to be that way, right? What we have to do is pick our very best concentration spell for the fight. We prep with stuff ahead of time if we need to, if we can. Get the dog up and running, have the Gem of Seeing up and running so we don't have to do that in combat. When combat starts, we're going to pick our concentration spell, and we're going to get that down right away. If you cast slow, and everything makes it save, and you affect 0 targets, on your next turn, you cast slow. If it was going to be good first, it's going to be good second. Cast it until you get a concentration spell that you want established. Once you've got that established, use your spells that do damage. Fireball, Poison Spray, True Strike. We've got plenty of options, but it's pretty straightforward. So that's how I think of a wizard, and I don't think you need to take 5 minutes to plan your turn. Get your concentration spell up and running, pick the best one. Then do your fireballs, synaptic static, poison spray. There are combats where it will make a lot more sense to cast a fireball on turn number 1. That's fine too. Then pick your concentration spell as your second spell you cast. But I don't think you have to think for 5 minutes to try to optimize your turns. Concentration spell, damage, cleanup. All right, finishing out this wizard. So we would finish out at Fighter 1, Wizard 19. That would give us an epic boon right at the level 20. There's a lot of things that are good. Being Elemental Adept or whatever, or not Adept, but Elemental Master or whatever it's called. There's good stuff. I like the Gift of True Sight. It just gives us True Sight, and then we can take the Gem of Seeing, and we never have to worry about that again. So we can throw that away. And that frees up an attunement slot, because Gem of Seeing is attunement. So Gift of True Sight. We have True Sight. We give up any items that we need. The level 16 feat, I like just taking Toughness. At this level, as a wizard, you just need more hit points. And then I would look for attunement to an Amulet of Health to take your Constitution to 18, somewhere along the way here to get more health as well. And remember, you get 3 attunement items. So if your 3 attunement items are the Arcane Grimoire, the best Arcane Grimoire you can get to increase your to hit and DCs. The Staff of Power is awesome item. And then for your third, you could use that Amulet of Health just to get more hit points. Or you could use an Ioun Stone of Mastery. It'll take your Mastery up by +1. It'll give you more poison doses, increase your hit rate. There's tons of stuff it does for you. But I think, Amulet of Health, Staff of Power, Arcane Grimoire, that's like the 3 attunement things that you would want. And if you did those things, your armor would be 20. And this is with a +2 breastplate, and the Staff of Power gives you 2 armor class. You're not carrying a shield at this point, right? You need to keep 1 free hand with this character still. So you've got the staff in one hand, a free hand with the other. Your armor class would be 20, 226 hit points. For the way I built the character, you would have a +10 to your wisdom save with that as a proficient save. +7 with intelligence just because you have high intelligence. +12 on con, +8 on strength. So looks pretty good. Those are tank level hit points. I mean, most tanks at level 20 have like 200 hit points. One of the other builds I did that was meant to be tanky is under 200 hit points. So having 226 hit points as a wizard puts you in the category of no fear. You've got good armor class, shield spell if you need it, tons of hit points, good saves, ready to go. And we can double dip damage. We can do spells, we can poison arrows and hand them off. We can guarantee concentration on all of our conjuration. So once we've got a conjuration concentration spell up and running, it's running unless we're down or dying. We get the free Misty Step kind of teleport. We've got permanent blind sight within 10 feet or 60 foot if we use our bat. We've got all kinds of different spells to control the enemies, to lock them in a zone, to push them out of a zone, to create areas of obscurement that we can operate in that they can't. And all of this stuff is going to enable the rest of our party to do interesting push effects and do what they're doing, and slowing the enemies down and letting everybody else kill them. That's going to be it for Zarna, the darkness-enabled control wizard. I hope you like this build. I hope there were some interesting things in here for people about the Conjuration subclass, minor conjuration, poison use. This turned into a much more complicated build than I thought it was going to be at first, but I had a lot of fun with it. Leave comments down below. I love to hear what you got to say. If you hit that like button on the way out if you didn't hit it on the way in, and subscribe to this channel to see more stuff like this in the future. I hope to see you in the next adventure.